Steve Harvey does not lose his composure easily. After years behind the Family Feud podium, he has developed the ability to handle almost anything that live television throws at him with humor, grace, and the timing of a man who has spent decades reading a room. But on a December evening in 2025, a husband said something to his wife on that stage, in front of 200 people and every camera in the building, that wiped the smile off Steve Harvey's face so fast it was like watching a switch get flipped. And what Steve said in response was not a joke, it was not a redirect. It was a direct, unflinching, personal rebuke that left the husband speechless, the audience on their feet, and the wife hearing words from a stranger on a game show stage that her own husband should have been saying to her every single day for the past 16 years. There was a time when a man's most basic duty was to protect his wife's dignity, especially in public. There was a time when the woman who gave you her name, her youth, and her years was the last person you would ever embarrass in front of other people. But when Wayne Brooks looked at his wife, Pamela, on a nationally televised game show and said something so dismissive, so casually cruel, that it sucked the air out of the room, Steve Harvey did what every person in that studio wished they could do. He fired back, and the words he chose did not just defend Pamela Brooks. They defined what respect in a marriage is supposed to look like for every person watching. If you believe that every woman deserves a partner who lifts her up instead of tearing her down, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. What Steve Harvey says to this husband is a message that every married person in America needs to hear. Pamela Brooks was 46 years old. She was from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a small city along the Arkansas River where everybody knew your family name and your family's business. Pamela was the oldest of 3 children raised by her grandparents, Walter and Estelle Jennings, after her parents divorced when she was 4. Walter was a retired carpenter who had built half the porches in their neighborhood with his own hands. Estelle was a church secretary who typed the weekly bulletin, organized the women's ministry, and made sweet potato pie so good that people drove from 2 counties over for a slice. They raised Pamela and her 2 younger brothers in a small house that Walter had built himself, a house that was never fancy but was always clean, always warm, and always full of the smell of whatever Estelle was cooking. Estelle taught Pamela everything she knew about running a home and caring for a family, but the most important thing she taught her had nothing to do with cooking or cleaning. Estelle used to say, "Baby, a woman's value does not come from the man standing next to her. It comes from the woman standing on her own 2 feet. Pamela understood the words, but did not fully grasp their weight until much later in life. By then, she had spent years letting someone else define her value, and it had nearly cost her everything. Pamela graduated from Pine Bluff High School and went straight to work. She took a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic and spent the next 20 years working her way up through various administrative roles in healthcare. By the time she was 40, she was the office administrator for a large orthopedic surgery group in Little Rock, managing staff schedules, patient billing, insurance coordination, and the 100 daily crises that come with running a busy medical practice. She was competent, dependable, and quietly indispensable. Her doctors trusted her, her staff respected her, and every evening she drove 45 minutes back to Pine Bluff, where the life she had built at work felt like it belonged to a different person entirely. She met Wayne Brooks at a cousin's wedding when she was 26. Wayne was 30, a heavy equipment operator for a construction company that built roads across central Arkansas. He was physically imposing, loud, and had the kind of personality that demanded attention whether the room wanted to give it or not. Wayne had opinions about everything and shared them without invitation. He was the man at the barbecue who told everyone how to grill. He was the man at the church who told the pastor what the sermon should have been about. He dominated every conversation he entered, and Pamela, who had been raised to be accommodating and polite, interpreted his forcefulness as confidence rather than what it actually was. They married after 14 months of dating. The ceremony was at Walter and Estelle's church. Estelle watched from the front pew with an expression that her friends would later describe as complicated. She loved Pamela. She wanted Pamela to be happy, but she had watched Wayne at family gatherings, and she had noticed the way he spoke over Pamela, corrected her in front of others, and made decisions without consulting her. After the wedding, Estelle pulled Pamela aside and said, "Baby, remember what I told you. Your value does not come from him." Pamela hugged her grandmother and said she knew. But knowing something and living it are two very different things. For the next 16 years, Pamela lived inside Wayne's version of their marriage. He decided where they ate, what car they drove, how they spent their weekends, and how much Pamela was allowed to spend from her own paycheck. He made jokes about her cooking in front of guests. He interrupted her stories at dinner parties. He called her ideas cute when she suggested things and then did whatever he had already decided to do. None of it was dramatic enough to be called abuse in the traditional sense. There were no raised hands, no shouted threats. It was subtler than that. It was a slow, systematic erosion of a woman's confidence through 1,000 small dismissals, each one too minor to object to on its own but devastating in their accumulation over 16 years. They had 2 children. Their daughter, Alyssa, was now 15, observant and sharp, with her mother's patience and her grandfather Walter's quiet stubbornness. Their son, Jalen, was 12, more outgoing, with Wayne's volume but thankfully more of Pamela's kindness. Pamela poured herself into her children with a devotion that compensated for everything she was not receiving from Wayne. She drove Alyssa to debate tournaments on weekends. She sat through every one of Jalen's basketball games. She made sure their homework was done, their lunches were packed, and their lives were stable, even when the emotional foundation of their household was anything but. Estelle passed away 18 months before the Family Feud taping. She was 83. Pamela sat beside her grandmother's hospital bed in the final hours and held her hand. Estelle could barely speak, but she managed to say one last thing to her granddaughter. She squeezed Pamela's hand and whispered, "Stand on your own 2 feet, baby. It is time." Pamela did not know what her grandmother meant. She thought it was about grief, about learning to live without the woman who had raised her. She did not realize Estelle was talking about something much bigger, but she would. Soon, the Family Feud appearance was organized by Wayne. He saw it as an opportunity to be on television and had applied without telling Pamela until the acceptance came through. The team was Wayne, Pamela, Wayne's brother Terrence, Pamela's coworker and close friend Lisa, and Walter, Pamela's 81-year-old grandfather, who agreed to come because Pamela asked and because he had never said no to his granddaughter in his entire life. The Brooks team was matched against the Choi family from San Jose, California, a Korean-American family of 5 that included a grandmother who spoke limited English but communicated everything she needed to through facial expressions that had the audience laughing from the very first introduction. The energy in the studio was warm and competitive. During introductions, Steve Harvey worked his way down the Brooks lineup. When he reached Wayne and Pamela, Steve asked Wayne to introduce his wife. What Wayne said set the tone for everything that followed. "Steve, this is Pamela. She is my wife. She does all right, I guess. She is not the best cook in the world, but she tries." He laughed at his own observation. Terrence, his brother, laughed too. Pamela stood beside him with a small, practiced smile. The same smile she had been wearing for 16 years. The smile that said this is fine when nothing about it was fine. Steve's eyes moved between Wayne and Pamela. He did not laugh. He gave a small, polite nod and moved on to introduce Walter. When Steve reached the elderly carpenter at the end of the lineup, Walter introduced himself with quiet dignity. "I am Walter Jennings. I am Pamela's grandfather. I built my house with my own hands and I raised this girl right here." He pointed at Pamela. "She is the best person in this family, and that includes me." The audience applauded loudly. Steve grinned. "I believe that, sir." Walter nodded once, his point made. The game began. The first round went smoothly. The Brooks team won the face-off. Answers came from around the lineup. When it was Pamela's turn, she gave a strong answer that landed on the board. Number 2 answer, 27 points. The audience clapped. Pamela smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that comes from doing something well and being recognized for it. And Wayne said, "See, even a broken clock is right twice a day." He said it casually, like a man tossing a comment over his shoulder. He did not even look at Pamela when he said it. He was looking at the audience, expecting a laugh. A few people offered uncomfortable, uncertain chuckles. Most did not. Steve Harvey's jaw tightened. He noticed it, filed it away, moved on. The second round continued. The pattern intensified. When Pamela hesitated before answering, Wayne muttered, "Here we go," loud enough for the microphones to catch. When she gave an answer that got a strike, Wayne shook his head and said to Steve, "I should have gone up there instead." When Lisa, Pamela's friend, gave a great answer, Wayne said, "See, Pamela, that is how you do it." Each comment was delivered with a chuckle, as if it were harmless banter. But the cumulative effect was visible. Pamela's posture changed. Her shoulders turned inward. Her voice got softer. She began looking at Wayne before speaking, as if seeking approval she would never receive. Steve was tracking all of it. His expression had shifted from professional neutrality to something darker. He had seen this before. He recognized the pattern. And he was waiting. The third round arrived. The question appeared on the board and Steve read it. "We asked 100 married men name the best thing about your wife." Wayne was up for the face-off against Mr. Choi. Wayne hit the buzzer first. Steve looked at him expectantly. "Wayne, name the best thing about your wife." Wayne grinned and glanced at Pamela. Then he turned back to Steve and said, loud and clear, with the confidence of a man who genuinely believed what he was about to say was funny, "She knows when to be quiet." He laughed. Terrence laughed. Nobody else in the studio made a sound. The answer was not on the board. That did not matter. What mattered was the absolute, suffocating silence that followed. 200 people sat in that silence and felt it press against their chests. The Choi family grandmother, who understood limited English, looked at her granddaughter for a translation. When the granddaughter whispered it to her, the grandmother's face changed, and she shook her head slowly in a way that needed no translation at all. Pamela stood in the family lineup. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Her arms wrapped around herself. She became physically smaller, right there on camera, in a way that was so familiar to her it was reflexive. She had been making herself small in response to Wayne's words for 16 years. But this time, 200 people saw it happen, and this time, one of those people was Steve Harvey. Lisa, Pamela's friend, reached out and took Pamela's hand. She held it tight and did not let go. Walter, at the end of the lineup, uncrossed his arms. His hands dropped to his sides. His fingers were open but they were trembling. The carpenter who had built porches with those hands was using every ounce of his 81-year-old restraint not to cross that stage. Steve Harvey set his card down on the podium. He did not set it down gently. He placed it down with a deliberateness that made a soft, definitive sound. He straightened his jacket. He took 2 steps toward Wayne. And the expression on his face was one that the audience, the crew, and eventually millions of viewers would describe identically. It was the face of a man who was done watching. Steve did not go to center stage. He walked directly to Wayne. He stopped close enough that the conversation felt personal, even though every microphone in the building was carrying it to 200 people. "Wayne, I want to ask you something." Steve's voice was low, controlled, and stripped of every trace of the comedian. "I asked you to name the best thing about your wife. The best thing. About the woman who has been married to you for 16 years. The mother of your children. And your answer was that she knows when to be quiet." Steve paused. The silence was surgical. "Let me tell you what I have observed in the last hour. Your wife gave a number 2 answer on the board, and you compared her to a broken clock. She hesitated before speaking, and you sighed into the microphone. She got a strike, and you told her you should have gone instead. And just now, on national television, you told the world that the best thing about your wife is her silence. Wayne, that is not a joke. That is a confession. You just told every person in this building and every person who will ever watch this how little you value the woman standing behind you." Wayne's smile vanished. He shifted his weight and tried to recover. "Steve, come on, man. I was just playing. She knows I am playing. We joke like that. Tell him, Pamela." He turned to Pamela, and for the first time that day, the audience saw something change in Pamela's face. She did not confirm. She did not nod. She did not offer the rescue that Wayne expected. She looked at him with an expression that was 16 years in the making. an expression that said she was done performing agreement with things that hurt her. She said nothing, and her silence was the loudest thing on that stage. Steve turned back to Wayne. She is not confirming, Wayne. She is not telling me it is a joke, because it is not a joke. I have been watching your wife shrink every time you open your mouth. Her shoulders dropped, her voice got softer. She started looking at you for permission before she spoke. That is not the body language of a woman who thinks her husband is funny. That is the body language of a woman who has been told, in 1,000 small ways, that she is not enough, and you have been doing it so casually, so naturally, that I do not think you even notice anymore. But I notice. This audience notices. And your wife, Wayne, she noticed a long time ago. She just stopped saying anything about it, because you taught her that silence was her best quality. The audience erupted. The applause was immediate, sustained, and emotional. People were standing. Several were crying. The Choi family across the stage stood in respectful solidarity, the grandmother nodding firmly as if she had understood every word through sheer force of moral agreement. Steve was not finished. He stepped back and addressed both Wayne and the camera. I have been married multiple times. I have failed. I know what it is like to be the man who did not treat his wife the way she deserved. I am not standing here as a perfect man. But I learned something that cost me dearly to learn, and I will say it right now so that maybe it costs somebody else less. He pointed at Pamela. That woman gets up every day and drives 45 minutes to a job where she manages an entire medical practice. She handles doctors, patients, billing, scheduling, and staff. She does all of that, and then she drives 45 minutes back home and takes care of your household, your children, and you. She has been doing that for 16 years, and the best thing you can say about her is that she is quiet. Steve's voice rose slightly, not in anger but in conviction. A real man looks at the woman beside him, and he knows that she is the reason his life works. He knows that without her, the house falls apart, the kids struggle, and he is eating cereal for dinner in a dark apartment. A real man does not mock his wife on national television. A real man stands on this stage and tells Steve Harvey and the whole country, the best thing about my wife is that she chose me, and I spend every day trying to deserve it. That is the answer, Wayne. That is the #1 answer, and you did not even come close. The second standing ovation was even longer than the first. Lisa was holding Pamela's hand so tightly their knuckles were white. Walter had tears running into the deep creases of his weathered face. He did not wipe them. He let them fall. Then something happened that nobody expected. Pamela stepped forward. She stepped out from behind Lisa and Deshawn and the protective circle that had formed around her, and she walked to center stage. She stood beside Steve Harvey, and for the first time in 16 years of marriage, possibly for the first time in her adult life, Pamela Brooks spoke without looking at Wayne for permission first. My grandmother raised me. Her name was Estelle. She made sweet potato pie, and she typed church bulletins, and she told me every single day that my value does not come from the man standing next to me. It comes from the woman standing on her own 2 feet. She told me that my whole life, and I heard her, but I did not listen. Because I thought love meant being patient. I thought love meant being quiet when things hurt. I thought love meant making yourself small so someone else could feel big. She paused. Her voice was shaking, but it was also gaining strength with every sentence, like a muscle being used for the first time after years of being still. But standing here today, on this stage, hearing Steve Harvey say out loud what I have been feeling for 16 years, I finally understand what my grandmother meant. She was not talking about pride. She was not talking about independence. She was talking about this moment. The moment when you stop shrinking. The moment when you stop letting someone else's words define what you are worth. I have managed a medical practice with 60 employees. I have raised 2 children who are kind and smart and brave. I have driven 90 minutes round trip every day for years so my family could have a good life. And the best thing about me is not my silence, Wayne. The best thing about me is that I finally decided to break it. The ovation that followed was so loud and so sustained that the production crew later said it was the longest unbroken audience response in the show's recent history. People were on their feet. Many were weeping openly. The Choi grandmother was clapping with both hands above her head. Walter was standing perfectly still, tears streaming down his face, his hand pressed over his heart. Steve Harvey was turned away from the camera, his hand over his eyes, his shoulders moving in a way that told everyone he was crying and did not care who saw. When the applause finally subsided, Steve turned to the camera. His eyes were red, his voice was thick, but his words were clear. I have been in television for decades. I have given speeches to arenas full of people. I have made millions laugh. But the most important thing I have ever done on any stage was stand here tonight and watch a woman named Pamela Brooks find her voice after 16 years of being told that silence was her best quality. She just proved that silence was never her strength. Her strength was waiting. Waiting until the moment was right. Waiting until the words were ready. And when she finally spoke, she did not just speak for herself. She spoke for every woman who has ever been made small by the person who should have been making her feel tall. Pamela, your grandmother Estelle is watching right now, and I promise you she is proud. The game was never completed. Both families received their full prizes and compensation. The Choi family grandmother approached Pamela backstage and, through her granddaughter's translation, said, "In Korean, we have a word. It is called han. It means a deep sorrow that comes from being silenced. But you released yours today. You are free now." Pamela held the elderly woman's hands and thanked her in a moment of cross-cultural understanding that needed no further translation. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of the most watched and most discussed Family Feud moments of the year. The clip of Wayne saying, "She knows when to be quiet," and Steve Harvey's immediate, visceral response was viewed over 115 million times in the first month. But the clip that was shared even more, the one that embedded itself into the cultural conversation permanently, was Pamela's speech. Her words about breaking her silence after 16 years became a rallying cry for women who recognized their own lives in her story. The phrase, "The best thing about me is that I finally decided to break it," was quoted in therapy sessions, printed on shirts, and referenced in sermons and self-help workshops across the country. Pamela returned to Pine Bluff and continued working at the orthopedic practice in Little Rock. She did not give public interviews for the first 2 months. She focused on her children and on the slow, painful, necessary process of rebuilding the sense of self that 16 years of casual diminishment had eroded. Her friend Lisa later said, "The Pamela who came back from that taping was different. Not broken differently. Different in a good way. She started saying what she thought at work without apologizing for it. She started making decisions at home without checking with Wayne first. Little things. But little things add up, and they added up to a woman who was done being small." Pamela and Wayne separated 3 months after the episode aired. The separation was Pamela's decision. Wayne resisted at first, insisting that the show had blown things out of proportion and that their marriage was fine. But Pamela, for the first time, did not defer to Wayne's version of reality. She told him, in their kitchen, with no cameras and no audience, "You asked me to tell Steve Harvey that you were joking, and I could not do it. Because it was not a joke. It has never been a joke. And I am done laughing at things that hurt me." Wayne eventually gave a single statement through social media. He wrote, "I watched the episode. I saw what everyone else saw. A man who thought he was being funny while his wife was hurting. Steve Harvey told me what I should have figured out on my own a long time ago. I was tearing down the person who was holding everything up. I do not have excuses. I have regret. And I have a lot of work to do on myself before I am fit to be the kind of husband any woman deserves. Pamela was patient with me for 16 years. I did not earn that patience, but I am grateful for it." Walter, Pamela's 81-year-old grandfather, never gave an interview. He went back to Pine Bluff, back to his workshop, back to the house he had built with his own hands. But Pamela said that every time she visited, she noticed something new. A shelf he had sanded smoother. A porch rail he had reinforced. A window frame he had replaced. Walter did not talk about his feelings. He expressed them through the things he built and fixed, and in the months after the episode, he built and fixed more than he had in years. Pamela understood. Her grandfather was doing for the house what he wished he could do for her. Making it stronger. repairing what was worn, ensuring it could stand on its own. Alyssa, Pamela's 15-year-old daughter, handled the aftermath with a maturity that impressed everyone around her. She did not publicly discuss her parents' separation, but she told her mother something one evening that Pamela said she would remember forever. They were sitting on the porch of Walter's house, and Alyssa said, "Mom, I used to think you were quiet because you did not have anything to say. But now I know you were quiet because nobody was listening. Steve Harvey listened. And then you spoke. And I have never been prouder to be your daughter." Pamela held Alyssa for a long time without speaking, because sometimes the most meaningful words are the ones that make you too full to respond. Steve Harvey spoke about Pamela at multiple events throughout the following year. At a men's accountability breakfast, he gave a speech that was recorded and subsequently viewed millions of times online. He said, "I stood on my stage and asked a man to name the best thing about his wife. And he said she knows when to be quiet. I want every man hearing my voice right now to sit with that for a second. Imagine your wife is standing beside you on national television, and the best thing you can think to say about her is that she stays silent. That is not a compliment. That is a confession that you have spent your marriage training your wife to disappear. And I am here to tell you that the women in your lives are not meant to disappear. They are meant to be seen. They are meant to be heard. They are meant to be celebrated. And if you cannot do that, then you do not deserve to have them standing next to you." 1 year after the episode, Family Feud invited Pamela back for a special update. She walked onto the stage to a standing ovation that lasted over 90 seconds. She wore a deep burgundy dress she had picked out herself without asking anyone's opinion, and around her neck was Estelle's gold cross, a family heirloom that Walter had given her the Christmas after Estelle passed, saying, "She wanted you to have it. She said you would know when to wear it." This was when Steve hugged her and asked how she was doing. Pamela smiled, not the small, practiced smile from a year ago, a wide, unguarded, unapologetic smile that took up her whole face. "Steve, I am loud now. I say what I think. I make decisions without checking with anyone. I rearranged my entire living room last weekend because I wanted to, and nobody told me it was a bad idea. I got a raise at work because I asked for it out loud, in a meeting with my voice. My daughter is on the debate team, and she told me she joined because she wants to learn to speak the way I spoke on your stage. And my grandfather built me a new bookshelf last month. He did not say what it was for. He just brought it over, put it in my living room, and said, 'Fill it up,' so I am filling it. With books, Steve. With words, with all the things I was too quiet to say for 16 years. Steve shook his head, tears forming. "Pamela Brooks. A year ago, the best thing about you was supposedly your silence. And now look at you. You are filling bookshelves. You are raising a debater. You are asking for raises. You are rearranging furniture because you feel like it. You know what the real best thing about you is? It is that you survived being undervalued for 16 years and came out the other side louder, stronger, and more alive than the man who tried to keep you quiet ever was. Your grandmother Estelle told you to stand on your own 2 feet. You are not just standing, Pamela. You are running. And nobody is going to tell you to be quiet again." The story of Pamela Brooks and the night Steve Harvey fired back at her husband endured as one of the most referenced and most beloved moments in Family Feud history, not because of the confrontation, though the confrontation was powerful, but because of what came after. A woman who had spent 16 years being told that her silence was her best quality stood on a national stage and discovered that her voice was the strongest thing she had. Estelle Jennings, the church secretary from Pine Bluff who made sweet potato pie and typed bulletins and told her granddaughter every day that her value came from within, was proven right in front of the entire country. And Walter, the carpenter who built things with his hands because words were never his way, built one last thing for his granddaughter, a bookshelf, and he told her to fill it up, and she did. If this story reminded you that no one has the right to make you feel small, that your voice is worth more than your silence, and that it is never too late to stand on your own 2 feet, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. we bring you the most incredible and emotional Family Feud moments every single week. Real families, real strength, and real voices that refuse to stay quiet. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.